Hey, welcome back to the Musicians Talk Show podcast. This is going to be episode number 13, which is extremely fitting because our guest today is Joel Hoekstra.
Yes.
Who has done, the only word is a plethora of things.
That's a great
word. And one of those things is Joel Hoekstra's 13. So extremely fitting. Also, the only guest to have to cut the interview short because he's going to a movie with Cher.
Yeah, understandable.
So we told him to cancel it and hang out, and man, he chose Cher over us, man.
Yeah, well, he did tell her yes, he would be there, so.
Cancel, dude.
This is the Musicians Talk Show.
Yeah, exactly.
You know
anyway, let's get to it, man. Joel has so many awesome things to share, and man, what an incredible guitar player with an incredible resume. And I'm super excited for you guys to hear what he has to say, so let's get after it. I wanted to start at the top. So how'd you get started in music? Where did it all start for you?
Well, my parents are classical musicians, or were classical musicians, and so music was always happening around the house, and they had me on cello and piano at a very young age. Cello, I started at 3, and piano at 7.
Wow.
And I wasn't like particularly good at either one, I just did the bare minimum amount of practice that they would make me do when I was a kid. And I guess it was age of 11 when I saw/heard AC/DC for the first time, because it was right at the beginning of MTV as well. Mm-hmm. So remember when there was 10 videos on MTV that ran day round? So, you'd see, so I was seeing Angus Young a lot and heard Back in Black, and that's definitely what inspired me to pick up the guitar.
That's awesome, man. So where did it go from there? Was it just always, hours and hours of practice every day, or?
Yeah, I was pretty into it because I think that those early years of playing music gave me a sense of pitch and rhythm. So it was pretty neat when a friend of mine showed me a power chord. And from there, it was I get it. So many of the songs I've been hearing, that's what it is. And I could figure out all these Black Sabbath songs all of a sudden just by moving them around, moving the power chord around. And so, yeah, I was pretty inspired. I had to kind of earn my way. My parents wanted to see I was dedicated enough to get before they bought me an amp. So I was playing through my home stereo plugged in through the auxiliary input, Yeah. I remember cranking up the volume all the way and blowing the fuse on the stereo and all the time.
Totally.
But anyway, yeah, those were the early days. So yeah, I'd say I was inspired right out of the gate. And in the early days, it was all hard rock / heavy metal when I started, and then it branched way out from there, to the obviously I just appreciate music in general nowadays, and but in the very early days at that age of 11, I think it's all about proving how tough you are and everything like that. So hard rock, heavy metal was pretty much that was the choice.
So besides AC/DC, what were some of your favorite bands and favorite guitarists?
Definitely that Black Sabbath, Tony Iommi, all those riffs. I'd say Ozzy Osbourne, all that stuff. Not necessarily at that time for the great leads because I couldn't really play it, but I liked the songs. I liked, I Don't Know. The first time I heard that riff, on Blizzard of Oz, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Definitely liked Iron Maiden a lot early on when I first heard them. It was back in the days when you would buy albums just for the artwork on the cover because it looked scary and cool. So I remember getting Number of the Beast, because it was wow, look at that. That's got to be about the coolest album ever. And, actually, in retrospect, it is an incredibly cool hard rock album. But, so they were big. Scorpions were big for me early on. And then it just kind of branched out into more, I'd say, melodic bands, maybe that weren't as heavy, but with a lot of talent,
Yeah.
I'm trying to give you some examples there, Boston, Foreigner, Journey, all that stuff.
Sure.
I liked all those bands growing up. Triumph was a big one for me, man. Rick Emmett was a big influence on me as, inserting the use of the acoustic guitar and classical into those Triumph songs was always a big influence. And definitely classic rock stuff too, not just I wasn't just a child of the 80s. music. I definitely liked 70s and 60s stuff, like Doors and Hendrix, and definitely like Pink Floyd, and all that stuff was an influence on me. And about as progressive as I got, but I was heavily into is like Rush and Yes. Those bands were big influences on me.
Cool. Nice. Well-rounded palette there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like that's over the course of years.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
we're talking me being 11 years old, got kind of going through being 17 or 18. That's kind of progressed all that. And guitar albums were huge at that time, dude. I mean, all the shredders were coming out. I guess I shouldn't use that term. I hate that term. But Satriani and Vai
Gilbert,
and Malmsteen all kind of broke in that time. And so I definitely listened to like the first Satriani record a lot, that Not of This Earth. A friend of mine had turned me on to that. I had that on album, on vinyl, and I used to listen to that on there all the time. And, with Vai, I mean, Passion and Warfare was a big record for me. I loved Steve Morse, The Introduction. I wore that out. Al Di Meola, I would get his stuff and listen to that. And, just back then, the guitar thing, the guitar virtuoso thing was so big. So, which I don't regret at all. It was great. It really helped push you as a younger player.
Mm-hmm. So what were some of your first experiences in early bands? I mean, what led you to join a group of musicians?
So early on, it would be like, me just rehearsing with like a drummer. I remember having like a summer where I'd jam with just a drummer, and we'd play whatever songs we knew together and talk about someday we'll have a band. And, but I think my first band that played gigs, I was 15. And we had our own songs. We had originals, but we covered a lot of like Dokken and stuff like that. That was like straightforward hard rock. And our singer kind of sounded a little like Don Dokken. So we did a lot of them. And yeah, I mean, that was where I got my feet wet gigging. And that band was called Outcry. So I grew up in the southwest suburbs of Chicago.
Okay.
In the same local scene, coincidentally, as like Dan Donegan from Disturbed, so we had like a lot of talent come out of that area, and guys that went on to do great things.
Awesome.
Yeah, we were talking with another a drummer actually a few episodes back about how it seems like groups of musicians seem to come from the same area sometime.
Yeah, I think we all kind of pushed each other, I guess. I mean, looking back on it, a lot of those guys played really, really well. And I think a lot of that was just the era that we were in. I think the time period that I kind of grew up through my teens was right when that, the end of being able to gig all the time, unfortunately, like as a younger band. Like I think in the 70s when the drinking age was 18, and those, bands that came out of Chicago like Styx, and those guys were gigging like, 3 nights a week when they were in high school. Those guys were like rock stars already before they even made it out of Chicago. With us, it was more like, you'd play the all ages show every 2-3 weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
And you'd flyer everywhere, and then you'd rehearse a whole lot and go play your big show.
So what drew you to the Les Paul?
Les Paul took a long time for me to get to, man, ironically enough. I mean, because I started out in that kind of have the Floyd Rose era, man. I mean, the guitar that I first had, that my parents first got me, was an Electro West Tone, which I think just reminded me of Angus's SG. And then I had a Kramer Beretta that I did a lot of shedding on, just a single EMG in it. And,
right.
And then from there, I kind of went to like a Phil Collin Model Jackson that I bought off of my friend Brett Garcid, and he was already a rock star. He was in Nelson at the time, and they'd had their big, #1 hit and all that stuff. And so I looked up to him, and he sold me that guitar. So that was, I kind of just started off on all that Floyd Rose stuff. And then in Chicago, everybody's so big on the blues and that kind of Americana thing. When I was gigging around a lot in the 90s, it was kind of really hip to play a Tele or a Strat more than it was to play a Les Paul. So it took me a long time. And then eventually, once I got a Les Paul, I was like, well, what took me so long?
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of feels like home, right?
It does, absolutely.
Do you-
For me, I mean, the Les Paul is without a doubt my favorite sounding guitar, and just because I have so many of them and have spent so many hours on them as well, it's my favorite feeling guitar as well. Even though you, in a weird way, you compromise some technique, but it's like you love the feel of that. I don't know how to put it. You
No,
know,
absolutely. I'm a Les Paul guy too, so I know. I know what
yeah,
you're saying.
the guitars with like the super slim necks and all that stuff almost freaked me out to play them. You know.
Yeah, exactly. You need that weight and that big slab of wood.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you kind of miss a little bit of the fight, I think, of playing a Les Paul when you go to like more of a shredder guitar, and that's without even taking into number one. It should always be how does the guitar sound,
Yeah.
before how it plays. Everybody, I think, kind of goes, first towards, how fast can I play on it, or how smooth is it, and instead of going, how does it really sound just playing an A chord,
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Which is going to be the bulk of really what you're going to do in a rock band, at least.
Yep. So with all this talk about Les Pauls, what do you think about the whole Gibson situation? Things aren't looking so great according to a few articles we see out there.
Yeah, I don't know. I just see the headlines more than anything. I haven't really read it. I think that they've spent a lot of time on some technology that
Right.
it's a little befuddling. The robot tuners and all that stuff is like, come on, man, just
Right.
keep creating quality Gibson instruments that you'd
Right,
think it would
yeah.
pay for itself, because everybody wants the vintage models, the reissues, but I think they still are putting out quality guitars. I mean,
Yeah.
I just got a Firebird from the custom shop this year. It's amazing. Sounds great, plays great.
Very cool.
So-
They look beautiful too.
Yeah, they're obviously still making great instruments. I hope they pull it together and
Yeah.
find a way out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it might be due to, like decreased guitar sales, and, rock music's not necessarily the top of the food chain anymore, so they're just dealing with
I don't
the
know,
changing-
man. I tend to think that it's just, from what I understand, an awful lot of money has gone into some of that stuff, the robot tuners
Yeah.
and things like that.
Right.
And I think maybe just pursuing some areas that they were envisioning being the big future that just hasn't really panned out. So
That's a good
maybe
point.
somebody will come in, and I would imagine it's such a reputable brand. Don't you think somebody's going to come in and finance it and save it?
I would hope they get a change of leadership or something, and they get back to their roots.
Something. I mean, one would think, right?
Right.
So, what would losing a company like Gibson mean for the music community? I mean, God forbid it comes to that. What does that mean?
I don't know, dude. I mean,
I don't think we've ever seen anything like that yet.
I'm just one guy trying to make a living doing it. Yeah, I have no idea. That's like, obviously a very big question. So who knows? It would be my response. I would be sad. Definitely sad.
We're just getting your thoughts on it, not anything we're looking for an answer for. Just one of those
No,
things.
I know.
Yeah.
It's just stuff like that is off. It's just hard to comprehend, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big thing to tackle for sure. So let's shift gears. You've obviously done a lot of studio work and a ton of stage work. Do you have a preference between being in the studio and being on stage?
No, I think they're both equally inspiring, but two different mindsets. Yeah, I mean, I've found myself at times, like when I'll have a day of tracking guitars on my own, and I'm working on something I'm very inspired on that I don't even want to take a break to eat or anything. I'll have worked like a 12-hour day and go like, man, I haven't eaten a thing. I haven't stopped. I've just been going 12 hours straight on this, and just because I'll be on, in such a different headspace.
Yeah.
And performing definitely puts me there too. Although I will say the studio, I don't have to deal with the anxiety. I mean, I think
The
live
build-up,
there's always attached anxieties, for sure. So-and-so's at the show. What are they going to think, and this and that? And, I always have nerves. I still battle nerves all the way to today, with playing live. So, but that being said, I can't really give you a preference.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's a pretty common answer we hear to that question, actually. So, what guitar recording tips would you have for people that are kind of, let's say, new to recording their instrument?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of routes you can go with that nowadays. I mean,
Sure.
I suppose, just having a good direct recording unit and a good sounding guitar and keeping it simple. Keeping in mind that guitar is a mid-range instrument. A lot of people like to, on their own, get a sound with a lot of treble and a lot of low-end thud, and the first thing you're going to have to do when you put that in a mix with a band is roll all that low end off and roll that high end down.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Right.
Definitely recommend just using an SM57. It's as a microphone, and my speaker of choice would be a Celestion Greenback 25 watt, and mic half on the voice coil, half off. So you get a little mix of the bright and a little mix of the warmth of the speaker, and straight cabinets usually over the slant, because the deeper the cabinet, you're going to get a little bit of the natural low end off of it.
Okay.
All that stuff. Keep in mind that big brands are big for a reason. There's a reason Marshall amps are so huge, because, they sound good, and they've been that way historically for years. It's like we're talking about a Gibson Les Paul as well. So, a Gibson Les Paul into a Marshall with a, or some amp, that sounds terrific, and put a 57 half on the voice coil, half off, or get yourself a direct recording unit, because you can do plenty of good stuff with those nowadays as well.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. What are your thoughts on things like the Kemper specifically?
I have the least experience on the Kemper, but I've heard great things, and I would like to do more on it. I've actually just, with the Fractal, had more experience. Like, I used the Fractal on Rock of Ages, and I used it with TSO, and I actually just started using it with Cher, as we had to kind of replace the guitar rig, which was amps and pedals and everything, with the Fractal. So that was an interesting task. It's the first time I've been tasked with make this thing sound identical to this rig.
Right.
So it's man, that the Fractal just keeps getting better every year, and all that stuff.
And they just came out with a new one too.
They're just making strides every year. So I think that stuff is a great place to, probably for beginners, to start with. Although I think it's a great education to just mic up a real amp too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's something to be said for the convenience factor of those, little boxes, right?
There is. I think that you can, if you don't keep it simple and kind of do what I was talking about. Typically when you're going to mic like a real speaker on an amp, half on the voice coil, half off, you got to roll the treble way down on your amp. It's going to be on 1 or 2, and the mids, usually about 7 or 8, and the bass on about, depending on what kind of guitar you're using, on just like 3 or 4, because the Les Paul is going to have plenty of low end. So again, it's a lot more mid-range than people would realize when you close mic. I think that the reason being for that is that they made the amplifiers basically designed so they sound good when people were playing to their own needs, right? Because when guys go to check out a Marshall at Guitar Center, they're kind of listening to the cabinet from up above it, right, with it kind of, playing to their legs, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
when
absolutely.
You're standing guitar on, or even when you're sitting, you're above the cabinet. So there's just an abundance of treble inherently on a standard, Marshall head going into a 412. So it's always best to get your sound on a real amp with your face down in the speaker to hear what's really coming out as much as you can.
Yeah.
Or, if nowadays they have wonderful robot mic adjusting systems that'll move your microphone.
I've seen some of those. Yeah,
you and
Yeah,
that's crazy. You can get all the detail in the control room without having to walk back out there.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So, shifting from the recording tips, what tour tips would you have as kind of a seasoned vet of the road?
Well, keep it simple. I think, when I first gigged with Night Ranger, I was like a fill-in for Reb Beach, who actually did the gig for a year. A lot of people forget. So Reb needed to miss a show, and I learned like 25 songs, was going in on no rehearsal, and there would be like the occasional moment where on these songs Jeff Watson was using like a phaser or something like that. So I showed up with a bunch of pedals, like to emulate any little thing that was on like the recordings, the original recordings or anything like that. And the first thing Gillis did when he walked on stage at soundcheck was go, "Gee, I think I'll go to Guitar Center and buy a bunch of pedals." He scoffed and like laughed at all these pedals with me. And I was like, and then, I said, well, he uses that there. And he said, yeah, but that's just, he said, look at how many more things can go wrong. He said, when you do fly dates, you keep it as simple as possible, as few variables that can go wrong. And he was absolutely right. I mean, it was a wonderful learning experience. Like, is the audience really going to miss that having a phaser on for 8 bars of that song? Absolutely not.
Right.
So it's more about the live presentation and the energy. And they'd have obviously more of an issue if you're down, like trying to, figure out if it's your power source or your patch cable or your pedal that's gone bad on you, right?
Right.
So keep it simple. And all that stuff just kind of eats tone anyway. The more you can have a cable directly into a head, or, most gigs require stage movement enough that I have to use a wireless. So a wireless direct into the head, you're going to get the best sound and the less that can go wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned going into Night Ranger, having to learn all those songs. I wanted to ask kind of a 2-part question. How do you approach going into an already established band like that? And I know some of the other ones you've been a part of as well. And how do you suggest learning a ton of songs in no time at all, like you were just saying?
Well, I devote any time that I have to it. I think that's been the key to me kind of getting ahead and getting the gigs that I've gotten, has been to be obsessive about my preparation for those gigs. And I could trace that down to just about every single one of them. I mean, I got the Night Ranger opportunity through doing that for Jim Peterick's World Stage house band, where I would learn like 35 songs. And back when I lived in Chicago, we would rehearse a couple of times before we'd do those shows with basically all his friends, featured artists and stuff like that. Jim was from the band Survivor, great songwriter. Anyway, when I moved into New York, I would do that on no rehearsal. So I'd learn the 35 songs or so, go in on no rehearsal and play the shows. And so Kelly Kagi from Night Ranger was one of the guys who would always come out and do his hits in those shows. And this would be like once a year you'd do these, not often, but that was how I got the opportunity to do the Night Ranger thing. When Reb needed to miss a show, Kelly said, "No, I know this guy. He'll learn like 35 songs and come in on no rehearsal and play the gig." And so they gave me that shot. And that was, also like, doing the Foreigner thing. I filled in for Mick Jones with 24 hours notice to get down their set. And
Jeez.
That's incredible.
Learning it in a short amount of time, that's out of sheer panic and desperation and whatever it takes, I'll make
motivation,
sheets or notes or charts if I have to. In that scenario, that was a tough one because I was going to be standing in front of 18,000 people that next night. So it was like I had these giant poster boards that had the forms of the song. So I knew all the riffs and all the sections, but I didn't want
arrangements,
to,
yeah.
For instance, in like Cold as Ice, the solo comes in at kind of a strange spot, So you wanted to make sure that you didn't drop the ball on where that came in. So I just had the form, how many times things went around, written on these giant poster boards, and then they were all kind of Velcroed on top of each other. So it was pretty funny on that first show. The tech would come out after each song and pull this big Velcro poster board and go walking off the stage with it. That was you do what you have to do out of
24
desperation.
hours, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but honestly, man, my preparation for anything, and that's been like, with Whitesnake, it so happened that my first thing was actually recording. Doing the Purple album, I learned note for note like all of the original versions, and then I would just shed ideas and different thoughts and wrote out all these stuff. David likes to say I came in with the Dead Sea Scrolls. I came in with all this stuff jotted down about each song and for ideas to present to him, and so you just kind of over prepare. And I think Even with the nowadays, obviously I've been doing a little bit the stuff here with the share gig, and that set, they gave me kind of an ISO of what the guitar player was playing, with the rest of it panned off to one side, and I just practiced it and practiced it and practiced it and practiced it, and I mean, just like, I get manic about it, and then I find that's kind of what gets you ahead. People just want to keep the machine rolling on these bigger gigs. They don't want to stop and have to take special notice that somebody new is there. So you try and make everybody as comfortable as possible. So I had to dig back and listen to a lot of it, and obviously had to have a deeper appreciation for it, and learned basically all of the stuff note for note, and had it all written down. So yeah, it was great, man. That obviously great music.
And working with Coverdale, can you talk about that experience a little bit? I mean, he's such an icon.
Yeah, David's great. I mean, there's like that side of him where it's like, wow, you go, geez, this guy's worked with Jimmy Page and Richie Blackmore and who the heck am I, But
yeah.
Then the other side of it is that he's just like kind of a fun-loving guy who just wants to be one of the guys, because he's been doing this, being in a band, since he was young. So he's very much about humor and joking around and being one of the guys. So he sets you at ease in that regard. And look, I'm, I guess, 4 years in at this point, and he's been a great boss.
That's awesome. So what led you to the share gig, which is what you're currently doing right now, right?
So that was, yeah. I'm actually, believe it or not, Cher is taking us all out to the movies. That's why I need to be in the lobby at 9 o'clock. How odd is that? So,
sad day.
Cher is taking the band and the dancers and stuff out to the movies tonight.
That's awesome. What are you guys going to see?
Black Panther. It's
great.
called.
Yeah, just saw it the other day. Really good.
I don't know anything about it, but I figure, how many times is somebody going to say Cher wants to take y'all to the movies tonight? So
yeah, you gotta
go. So that was kind of like, I just knowing that Whitesnake wasn't going to tour in 2017, so I just sent out a bunch of texts to people who I respect, colleagues and whatnot, just saying like, hey, if you hear of anything, keep eyes and ears open. And I was just building a year, which was a cool challenge. It was like, all right, let me see what I can do without my main band touring. Obviously we recorded. I recorded a new album with Whitesnake. Plus I also recorded on Restless Heart for a re-release someday. So a pre-existing Whitesnake album. So there was a couple albums, but one of the things that came about, as you mentioned, the Cher thing, and that came from, I believe, her guitar player Dave Barry, who plays on The Voice, the television show The Voice, got the recommendation from the other guitar player on that show, the main guitar player Justin Derrico, who plays with Pink. Justin's an amazing player, and so luckily somehow I came to mind, because I think I had just texted Justin, and he said, well, you should, don't be freaked out when I say the guy from Whitesnake, he's like, but you might want to get him, because Justin knows I've kind of have a grasp on a lot of different styles, and I'm not just playing fast or being a shredder.
Right.
I definitely have been through a lot in the music business and played in a whole lot of different things. So anyway, that got me the opportunity to sub, and it's kind of turned into a bit of a more of a full-time thing. I mean, I guess this is like the maybe 6th or 7th residency I've done with her now. So,
wow.
It's occupied quite a bit of time, actually.
Cool. Nice. So kind of using that as a springboard into this next question, how would you suggest to younger musicians, how would you suggest they succeed in today's industry?
Well, I think it's all about being productive every day, and you need to just break it down into smaller increments. A lot of people want like the end result in like 2 days these days. It's the instant gratification thing. You just kind of need to like put blinders on and go, what did I do today that was productive? And if you're working harder than everybody else that you see that's at it, you're going to do all right. And that kind of is all things too. That's not just the networking thing. Some people overdo it. You've got to spend a whole lot of time playing. You got to spend a whole lot of time playing on your own, a whole lot of time playing with other people, a whole lot of time networking, all of that stuff to build a career. It just takes a long time. I mean, I'd be the perfect example because I think that I was always busy, always making a living with my guitar since I got out of high school, essentially. Or since I did a couple years of college and went to GIT. But basically, since I've been 20 years old, I've been making my living with the guitar, and things didn't really take off for me in terms of like, ooh, can I have my picture taken with you and can I have your autograph, until I was like about 37, you know? So, I mean, there was like 17 years of me making a living with my guitar in there and doing well, you know, but just not being like a quote unquote famous guitar player.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned GIT I mean, a lot of people are coming out of high school and asking the question, music school, yes or no, you know? What would you say to those people?
Well, it obviously doesn't make a difference when it comes to getting a job, but it does give you time and experience. And that time at GIT for me is super special in my mind. I just remember it being a very magical time of like your whole life is ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, times have changed, man. You know, this was back before there was really the internet, and so there wasn't like a visibility of the world for me, like in terms of what was out there of guitar players my age. There were the only guys I could like go against in my mind were the guys like in my neighborhood or in my high school. You guys, right? I don't know what age you guys are, but like back in the day, like I graduated from high school in '88. You know, it was like, well, there's like the two best guitar players in school or whatever. You know, that was really new. And so it was a real eye-opener when you're going to Hollywood, California, and sitting in a room where it was just my class starting on the first day of 500 guitar players sitting in a room. You know, it was like, holy shit, like there's a lot of guys after this dream.
Yeah, kind of eye-opening, right?
Yeah, so again, that was a great education for me, and it felt really magical, you know, just like, wow, this is like incredible to feel that now. But nowadays people can go on YouTube or Facebook and see people their age, you know, doing incredible things at the touch of a button. So I think that the main thing would be to be productive every day. If there was one piece of advice I could give to younger players or just to people in general going after anything in life, I think there's too much placed on the natural ability and natural talent thing, or I'm no good at that. Well, you're no good at it because you haven't spent enough time doing it. It's that simple, man, you know?
Right, yeah.
I mean, it's funny how we like to put these limits on ourselves and make ourselves feel like victims when really it's just like, you know, and once you have that clear vision of that, it also gives you the ability to compliment other players, you know.
Yeah.
The older you get, like, you know, when I run across somebody who's really great, you know, nowadays I'm the first person to tell them that they're great, you know, and give them a compliment and obviously try to befriend them, because it's like you want people like that in your life. You want people like that in your life as inspiration. And yeah, I mean, I think when you're younger, you know, you tend to put up your guard against people like that, oddly enough. You know, you want to live in the world where you're the best in your head or something, and not let in, you know, but shoot, you know, it's better to learn from those people and use them as inspiration.
Absolutely. So the last couple questions here, how would you tell a younger player, or rather, what would you tell them to help them find their own unique voice on their instrument instead of just, you know, being the next Van Halen or being the next Joel Hoekstra? What would you say to kind of help them find their own voice?
Just live life, give it time, you know. I mean, I might be the wrong guy to ask about that. In a lot of ways, I've been the guy who's had to assimilate a lot of different voices in my life as sort of like a, you know, like when I got to GIT, that's right when Nirvana hit and the whole guitar scene kind of collapsed. So in terms of that, like, hey, man, what's your bag? And are you going to have it, you know, are you going to be signed to Shrapnel and, you know, be the next guy? And what do you do? Which maybe at the time for me was kind of the 8-finger tapping, which I was basically just sort of emulating TJ Helmerich, who was an early teacher of mine, an amazing guitar player. but that didn't happen like that. The scene collapsed. And so during the 90s, I had to learn to do all kinds of different things to make a living in music and whatever it took to kind of keep going forward and living life. So I know this is a long-winded answer, but if you stick with,
no, it's perfect
here, there's a point. I guess the point is that through all these experiences, I do feel like I have fallback things and staples in my playing and things that maybe I can be identified by. I guess that maybe my point is that ground base might be a little bit more diverse, and I'm not as immediately recognizable as, like, say, I'll just go because I just saw him on the Monsters of Rock cruise, but I'll say, like, George Lynch, where it's like George Lynch has a thing that he does, and he's George Lynch. He sounds just like that. Well, I've been the guy who, like, battled through the 90s playing like every style under the sun to try and make a living, So I have my fallback stuff. But in fairness to guys like that, I'm not as identifiable. So, I mean, I might be the wrong guy to ask the question to, but I would say it's just living life and just giving it time until you're naturally there.
Sure. Yeah.
I think a lot of times style comes from limitations too, as well. I mean, like, so for me, a lot of times it's that limitation would be time. If somebody gives me, like, hey man, can you cut this solo? Well, shoot, I have tonight. Okay. So I'm not going to invent, like, 10 new licks in this solo tonight. I'm probably going to play my standard stuff and stuff that I fall back on. So that stuff that you fall back on becomes your style that you're identified by.
Absolutely. And the last question I'll ask is, where can our audience find you if they want to keep up with everything you're doing?
So I still have a .com up. My name is unbelievably difficult. I should have had a stage name years ago. Reb Beach actually says, I don't know if you guys know Kip Winger, but when Kip said, hey man, who's getting the Whitesnake gig? And Reb said, Joel Hoekstra from Night Ranger. He said, man, that guy should have had a stage name years ago. That was the first thing Kip said. But anyway, yeah, you can go to joelhoekstra.com. It's JoelHoekstra.com. And then you can link over to any of my social media stuff from there. And I do my best to get back to everybody and all that good stuff. And so please reach out and say hello.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much, Joel. And we appreciate you coming on the show, and we look forward to a follow-up maybe very soon.
You bet, guys. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate you having me.
No problem. We'll be in touch. Thanks, Joel.
Cheers.
Hey, guys. First of all, thank you so much for listening. If you could please take a quick moment to subscribe on iTunes and leave a rating and review. Your feedback seriously is really important, and it helps us keep the show alive.
Check out musicianstalkshow.com to sign up for our mailing list. If you do, we're going to send you our main theme song and a few other surprises. Plus, you'll always be the first to know what episodes are coming up.
If you want to help support the show so we can keep putting out the highest quality content possible, please follow the Support the Show link at our website and consider donating to our Patreon page.
Lastly, if you have an idea for a guest or a question you want to discuss, contact us through any of the contact forms on our website, and we'll do everything we can to make it happen.
Whew, all right. That was a lot, but we got through it. Thanks again, guys, and we will see you soon.